He's considered the weakest hunter in the world, but after almost dying in a dungeon, he gains the unique ability to level up, which allows him to become the strongest. 10 years earlier, mysterious gates started appearing all over the world, releasing countless monsters, and they were immune to conventional weapons. Humanity struggled against them, but a group of humans awakened special powers, allowing them to defeat the monsters, and they became known as the Hunters. They're given rankings based on their abilities, and we learn that once their powers awaken, it's impossible for them to level up. So the only way for them to get stronger is to upgrade their equipment. We see a hunter named Kim as a man named Park approaches him, revealing that his wife is pregnant, so he needs to make money by raiding the dungeon. They notice a boy named Jinwoo approaching, and everyone greets him as Park wonders if he's someone important. But we learn that he's only an E-rank hunter, and he's considered the weakest in the world because he was almost killed while trying to clear the easiest dungeon. A girl named Juhi approaches him, wondering what happened to his face, so he explains that he got injured while raiding a rank E dungeon because there was no healer in their party, saying his companions were so strong that they didn't need one. Juhi thinks they're selfish, but he blames himself for being weak, saying he's used to being treated as a burden. The leader, Song Chi, calls them for a meeting, and everyone is glad to work with him because he's known as a capable hunter. They're about to enter the gate as Kim tells Jinwoo to be careful, thinking he might get injured again. We learn that he's using a generic knife as his weapon because that's all he can afford, but he's determined to succeed, and he enters the gate. We meet the chairman, Gan-hee, as he reveals that hunters make a profit by selling essence stones, which can be obtained by defeating monsters, and they're considered valuable resources because they can be used to craft powerful equipment. He adds that mana crystals can also be obtained in the dungeon, and they serve the same purpose, but they're not as potent as the stones. The government plans to use the stones and crystals as a new power source because they're incredibly efficient and they don't pollute the atmosphere. We return to Jinwoo as he obtains his first essence stone, but a goblin attacks him. So he tries to fight back, but his knife shatters, and he ends up getting stabbed. Park kills the goblin, and Juhi helps Jinwoo, who watches as their companions defeat the monsters. They're able to defeat the dungeon boss, and everyone celebrates, but Juhi wonders why Jinwoo is still a hunter, saying she's worried about him because he always gets injured. They collect the loot, but they appear to be disappointed, thinking it's not enough. But a hunter calls everyone, showing them a tunnel as they realize that it's a double dungeon. They know that they will find more loot inside, but Song Chi reveals that they can't explore it because they need to wait for orders from the Hunters Association. But Kim suggests breaking the rules so that they can collect the loot. Song Chi thinks it's too risky, saying they should take a vote. But half of them oppose the idea, including Juhi. Jinwoo is the only one that hasn't voted, and he's going to break the tie. So he realizes that his decision is going to affect the outcome. He considers that he could end up dying, but he thinks about his current situation, knowing his father is missing and his mother is in the hospital. His sister can't help him because she's still a student, so it's up to him to provide for her, knowing he needs the money to make ends meet. So he decides to enter the tunnel. Meanwhile, the officials are testing the powers of the new hunters to determine their rankings. We meet the guild master of the Hunter Guild, Choi, as he orders the officials to send offers to promising newbies because they need more hunters in the guild. We see thieves stealing a bag, and they're about to escape, but a girl gets in the way, retrieving the bag and causing them to crash. She returns it to the owner, and everyone recognizes her as the S-rank hunter Cha, but she doesn't like getting the public's attention, so she escapes from the scene. Back in the dungeon, the hunters explore the tunnel as Juhi questions Jinwoo's decision, reminding him that he almost died. He knows that she saved his life, and she tells him to show his gratitude by having dinner with her, causing him to become flustered. At that moment, they see a door, thinking the boss must be inside. But as they enter, they realize that it's filled with statues, and Jinwoo sees one of them, realizing that it's bigger than the others. As everyone wonders why there are no monsters, they see an ancient tablet which mentions the commandments of the temple. Song Chi reads it, revealing that it's telling them to worship and praise God and prove their faith to him, or they won't be able to leave the room alive. But Juhi notes that the huge statue appears to be watching them, and the door suddenly closes, causing everyone to panic. A hunter tries to leave, saying they shouldn't have entered the tunnel, but a statue attacks him, killing him in an instant, and everyone falls into despair, wondering how they're supposed to escape. Jinwoo thinks that the statues are too strong to be in a D-rank dungeon, and he looks at the huge statue, realizing that it's watching them. He recalls how he always has a brush with death during his raids because he can't keep up with the other hunters, but he never gave up, and he learned to compensate for his weakness by observing everything in detail. He can tell that they're in trouble, so he tells everyone to take cover as the statue fires an energy beam, destroying everything in its path. Everyone realizes that their lives are in danger, and Song Chi tells everyone not to move because it could trigger another attack. He approaches Jinwoo, wondering how he was able to sense the danger. He explains that it was just a gut feeling, but he realizes that Song Chi lost his arm, and he tells Jinwoo to help him stop the bleeding. So Jinwoo covers him with bandages as he mentions that he was planning to ask for Juhi's help, but she always freaks out when she experiences pressure, and this explains why she only joins easy raids despite being a B-rank healer. Song Chi explains that he's been to B-rank dungeons, but he's never seen a monster as powerful as the statue, thinking it belongs to an S-rank dungeon. He recalls the commandments written on the tablet, and Jinwoo thinks that the huge statue is God. Song Chi knows that they are no match for it, so they need to find a way to escape. But a hunter mentions that he doesn't want to die, and he charges forward with ridiculous speed, but the statue attacks him, destroying him in an instant. Jinwoo realizes that it can kill them if it wanted to, wondering why it isn't attacking them. He recalls the writing on the tablet, asking Song Chi about it, so he mentions that the first commandment is to worship God. Jinwoo thinks that the dungeon has its own rules, and he stands up as Song Chi tries to stop him, thinking he could get himself killed. But Song Chi realizes that he's determined to survive, and the statue of God prepares to attack him, but he bows his head as he notes that it spared his life. So he tells everyone to prostrate themselves, saying it won't attack them if they keep their heads low. They follow his instructions, and the statue's eyes deactivate, but it suddenly starts smiling, so everyone becomes worried. But Park notes that it isn't doing anything, and everyone thinks they're safe, but it suddenly starts moving, walking towards them as they start to panic. Jinwoo reminds them that the second commandment is to praise God, and a man approaches the statue, claiming he knows what to do. He starts reciting a prayer, but it smiles at him as Jinwoo realizes that his plan isn't working. He gets crushed to death, and everyone starts running away as it chases after them. Park thinks about his family, knowing they're waiting for him to return, but he approaches a statue, and it starts moving, slicing him in half. Jinwoo thinks about the second commandment, realizing that the statues with weapons are killing his companions, and he sees statues with instruments, thinking they need to be activated. So he tells everyone to approach them. They follow his instructions, and the statues start playing the instruments, causing them to feel relieved because their lives have been spared. Jinwoo approaches a statue with Juhi, but it doesn't activate, and he realizes that it won't work if there are two people close to it. So he tells Juhi to stay there, and he runs to activate the last one, but the statue of God starts pursuing him. It's about to crush him to death, and he manages to avoid it, but he gets blown away, activating another statue by accident. It attacks him, smashing the ground, and Juhi thinks he's dead. But we see him crawling to the last one, refusing to give up, as the statue of God continues to pursue him. It stomps on him, but the last statue starts singing, and we see that he was able to activate it. So the statue of God spares him, returning to its throne as he realizes that they have completed the second commandment. Juhi approaches him, but she realizes that he lost his leg, so she tries to heal him, but she ends up reaching her limit. Everyone realizes that their companions are dead, and Kim blames Song Chi for everything because he's the leader of the group. Their companions think Kim is being unfair because he suggested breaking the rules, and they start blaming each other. But Song Chi takes responsibility because he was the one who made the final call. An altar suddenly appears as Jinwoo explains that the third commandment is to prove their faith to God, thinking they need to perform a human sacrifice to survive. Kim tells Song Chi to offer his life because he's the leader of the group, and he agrees to this. So he approaches the altar, but a fire suddenly appears, so everyone becomes confused, and Jinwoo tells them to help him reach the altar because he wants to examine it. As they approach it, more flames appear, and Jinwoo wonders if anyone will arrive to rescue them. But Song Chi explains that the gate is about to fully open, so nobody will be able to save them. We learn that a gate remains inactive for 7 days after it appears, but after that period, monsters will be able to enter the world in what's known as a dungeon break. So hunters are sent into the gate to prevent it from happening by defeating the dungeon boss. Jinwoo realizes that if they fail, the statue of God will be able to enter their world, so they need to clear the dungeon at all costs. He advises everyone to approach the altar, and more flames appear as the altar activates, causing a ring of blue flames to surround it. The door opens as everyone wonders if they can leave, but the statues start moving as a blue flame disappears. Everyone panics, but Jinwoo notes that the statues stop when he looks at them, and he tells everyone to keep their eyes open so that the statues won't be able to move. It appears to be working, but one of them panics, and she starts running away, causing a red flame to disappear. She manages to leave the room, and everyone wonders what's happening because the commandment is to prove their faith. Jinwoo thinks it's a trap, but another one runs away, so he warns the others that they will have blind spots if more people leave. He thinks the blue flames serve as the timer, and the goal is to survive until they disappear, but Kim knows he isn't sure because he has no evidence to support his theory. Kim thanks him for helping them survive, but he mentions that he has a family waiting for him, and he decides to run away. Jinwoo realizes that they can't stop all of the statues, and Song-chi tells Ju-hee to escape with Jinwoo, but her legs stop moving because she has already spent all of her energy. So Jinwoo tells Song-chi to escape with her, saying he won't be able to run away because he only has one leg, and he gives her an essence stone, telling her to use it to buy dinner. She doesn't want to leave him, but Song-chi knocks her out and carries her away. Jinwoo is the only one left, knowing he doesn't stand a chance, but he takes a sword, planning to fight until his last breath. But the statues attack him, blowing him away, and he ends up losing an arm. He endures a brutal beatdown, and he lands on the altar as a statue prepares to strike him down. He notes that he doesn't want to die, so he starts crying, but the timer expires as he receives a system message asking him if he wants to become a player. He wakes up in a hospital, realizing that his body has been completely healed. He wonders if it was just a dream, but the manager of the Hunter Association surveillance team, Jin Chul, enters his room. Jin Chul explains that he was unconscious for the past 3 days, and he wonders what happened to Ju-hee and Song-chi. Jin Chul reveals that they survived, but Song-chi lost his arm, so he might be forced to retire as a hunter, and Ju-hee is suffering from trauma, so she needs psychiatric care before she can join another raid. He reveals that the White Tiger Guild rushed to the dungeon because they were alerted by the survivors, but they never saw the statues, and Jinwoo was found lying on the ground. Everyone finds this strange, but they believe that the survivors are telling the truth because the remains of the other hunters were found on the scene. Jin Chul thinks that an E-ranked hunter could never survive the incident, so he believes that Jinwoo unlocked a new level of power through a second awakening. He pulls out a gadget, explaining that it will measure Jinwoo's magic, and he becomes excited, thinking he has become stronger. But as he touches it, we see that his score is 10, which is considered abysmal because even the weakest hunters get a score of 70. So Jin Chul explains that they were mistaken, and they leave the room thinking he's as weak as a civilian. Jinwoo is disappointed with the result, but he wonders why they didn't inquire about the screen because he can see it floating in his room. He wonders if he's the only one who can see it, and at that moment his sister Jin arises, revealing that she was worried about him. She tells him that she will quit school and get a job so that he can stop being a hunter because he always ends up in the hospital. He apologizes for making her worried, and he inquires about the screen, but she becomes confused because she can't see it. He asks her how she checks her messages in video games, and she tells him that he just needs to open the message box. So he mentions the message box, and the system recognizes his command, informing him that he has a daily quest. He thinks about how he has become a player, and Jaina decides to let him rest as he reads his notifications, realizing that the system is designed to assist him, but he will receive a penalty if he fails to comply. He accepts the daily quest, and the system gives him a simple workout routine, warning him that he will receive a penalty if he fails. But Jinwoo thinks it's impossible to complete it because he's still in the hospital, so he decides to take a nap. Meanwhile, Jin Chul reports to Gon-hee, informing him that Jinwoo didn't undergo a second awakening. Ganhee mentions that the case is full of mysteries, thinking there's still much they need to learn about dungeons, so they decide to label it as a special case which will require further evaluation. Choi orders Cha to become the instructor in AB rank raid, saying it will serve as practical training for the new recruits. She thinks she isn't fit for the role, but he tells her that she just needs to fight, and everyone will learn from her example. Choi reveals that the Hunters Guild is one of the largest in the country, but they're nothing compared to the best guilds in the world. He knows that a hunter's rank can't be changed, but he thinks they can improve by working on their combat abilities. Jinwoo is sleeping on his bed, but the timer for the quest expires, and the system informs him that he has failed his quest, so the ground starts shaking, causing him to wake up. He finds himself in the middle of the desert, wondering if he's dreaming, but he encounters a giant centipede as the system tells him to survive for 4 hours. He panics and starts running away as the monster chases after him, but more centipedes appear, and he eventually becomes exhausted. He's about to get eaten, but the timer expires, so he returns to the hospital as the system informs him that he has completed the penalty quest. He ends up collapsing, and the nurses enter his room, wondering what happened to him. We cut to Juhee as she's invited to join a D rank raid, but she declines because she still hasn't recovered. She learns that Jinwoo is in the hospital, so she decides to visit him, but she hears the nurses complaining about his behavior, thinking he's insane because he just recovered but never stops training. Jinwoo takes a break, and we learn that every time he completes a daily quest, his body fully recovers, and he gains ability points, which he can use to increase his stats. We learn that he has an inventory screen and can learn skills, but he thinks his situation is weird because he feels like he's playing a video game. He returns to his room, where he reveals that he gets a random loot box when he completes a daily quest. He opens it, causing a key to appear, as the system mentions that he can use it to access an instance dungeon in a subway. He becomes confused because he doesn't know what an instance dungeon is, but he thinks the key will lead him to an event which can help him get stronger. Jinwoo visits his mother in the hospital, and in a flashback from 4 years ago, his mother suddenly collapses, so they take her to the doctor. He explains that she's suffering from a rare condition known as the eternal sleep disease, which came into existence when the gates appeared. It's caused by continual exposure to mana, but it's incurable, so they decide to put her on life support. Jinwoo needs money to make ends meet, so he starts working at a construction site, but he suddenly awakens his powers, and he becomes qualified to work as a hunter. He becomes excited, knowing his life is about to change, but he realizes that he's so weak that he can't even defeat a goblin, and the other hunters look down on him, seeing him as a burden. Back in the present, Jinwoo continues his training, and he increases his strength. He heads to the subway, and he takes his key, using it to unlock the instance dungeon. He decides to enter it, thinking he can run away if it gets too dangerous, but the exit suddenly closes as the system informs him that the only way to escape the dungeon is to defeat the boss or use a teleportation stone. He realizes he's in trouble because he isn't sure if he can survive on his own. Jinwoo decides to explore the dungeon, and 3 goblins suddenly appear. He struggles to keep up with their movements, and he falls to the ground as a goblin tries to stab him, but he dodges and launches a counterattack, killing the goblin in 1 hit. The others continue to attack him, but he easily defeats them as he notes that he has become stronger. But a wolf suddenly appears, and it charges at him, shattering his knife. He realizes that it's stronger than the goblins, and his legs start trembling as he realizes that he's afraid. The wolf charges in, and it manages to scratch him, as he notes that he has no healer, so he's going to die if he suffers a fatal injury. He evades the wolf's attacks as he notices that his body feels lighter than usual, and he manages to overcome his fear. He punches with all his might, knocking the wolf down, and he realizes that he was able to hurt it because he focused on improving his strength. But the wolf recovers, and it lunges at him, so he tries to stop it with his fists, but he realizes that his attacks are working. So he starts running away, thinking he doesn't stand a chance because he has no weapon. But at that moment, he recalls that he saw something in his inventory, so he opens it, and he takes a magic sword as the wolf lunges at him. He attacks it, slicing it in half. He wonders why he has the sword in his inventory because he knows that it belongs to Kim, and it's too expensive for him to afford, but he decides not to think about it. He notes that his wounds have healed, but 2 more wolves appear as he realizes that his sword is stuck in the ground. Jinwoo starts to panic, but as the wolves approach him, he manages to lift it, and he takes a swing. But the wolf is able to catch it, so he kicks it, causing it to weaken its grip, and he slices its head off. Seeing this, the other wolf decides to retreat, and as he rests, he realizes that he has reached level 2. He notes that he never leveled up by completing quests, so he realizes that actual combat allows him to gain experience. He notices that all of his stats have increased, thinking it's more efficient to get stronger by leveling up because he acquires 5 points with each level, while the daily quests only give him 3 points. But Jinwoo realizes that he just defeated 5 monsters, thinking he shouldn't get carried away. He checks for magic gems but finds an item instead. The system tells him that he found a shop, and he tries to buy something, but he realizes that he can't because his level is too low. He decides to sell the item, allowing him to earn 20 gold, but he wonders how much it's worth in cash, thinking it isn't much because he appears to be in an E-rank dungeon. He wonders how he can clear the dungeon because he doesn't know where to find the teleportation stone, and he thinks he isn't strong enough to defeat the boss, but he thinks he might stand a chance if he continues to level up. He encounters a pack of wolves, but he isn't afraid of them. He charges in, swinging his blade and killing them as they approach him. He ends up getting surrounded, but he isn't bothered, and he slaughters all of them, allowing him to level up. Jinwoo realizes that his sword is about to break, but he knows that weapons are expendable, and he's glad that the fight is over. He checks his inventory and realizes that he has already acquired the teleportation stone, but he decides to stay in the dungeon because he wants to defeat the monsters to get stronger, thinking they will disappear if he teleports away. Jinwoo heads deeper into the dungeon, slaughtering the monsters along the way as he notes that his battles are becoming easier. We learn that he can assess a monster's level by looking at the color of its name. The monsters with white names are weaker than him, while the ones with red names are stronger. He knows he's making progress because the wolves used to have a red name, but now it's white. He senses the presence of the boss, and he isn't sure if he can defeat it, but he decides to fight it anyway. He reaches a swamp and sees a creature charging at him with incredible speed. He tries to block but gets knocked back and realizes that his sword is broken. A huge serpent appears, and Jinwoo notes that its name is Orange, so it has the same level as him. He realizes that its body is covered in scales, so his sword is useless against it. It tries to attack him, and he manages to dodge, but he wonders how he can defeat it. It starts pursuing him, and he struggles to avoid its attacks, but it hits him with its tail, blowing him away. A train is about to crash into him, so he dashes away and barely manages to avoid it. He thinks he still isn't strong enough, wondering how hard he has to work to escape his life of constant ridicule. He continues to struggle against the serpent, recalling that he's considered the weakest hunter in the world, thinking the weak are always powerless against the strong, so he's determined to become stronger. He charges at the serpent, evading its attack and plunging his sword into its scales. It tries to attack him, but he avoids it and leaps into the air as the serpent tries to eat him. He suddenly disappears, and the serpent realizes that he's clinging to its body. Jinwoo uses his strength to crush its scales, and it appears to be in pain, so it smashes him against a pillar. But he doesn't let go and presses down on the serpent's neck with all his might, causing it to bleed. As he continues to tighten his grip, the serpent runs out of blood and crashes to the ground as the system informs Jinwoo that he has defeated the boss. He receives a powerful dagger as a reward along with a vial of the serpent's venom, thinking its effects are terrifying because it permanently reduces strength to increase defense. With the boss defeated, the dungeon returns to its original state, and Jinwoo leaves the subway, wondering where everyone went. A soldier approaches him, telling him that civilians aren't allowed in the area, but the soldier sees him carrying a sword, realizing he's a hunter, so he apologizes for being rude, saying he will escort him to the area. Jinwoo notes that the city is in ruins, and the soldier tells him that there was a dungeon break, but all the monsters have been dealt with except for the boss. He senses a powerful presence, and we see a huge golem fighting a group of hunters as the civilians watch them from a distance. The hunters struggle against the golem because its defense is ridiculous, so even their most powerful attacks aren't working. Jinwoo arrives, and he notes that they're weak because most of them are only E rank. He realizes that Ju-hee is with them, and she tries to cast a spell, but she recalls what happened in the dungeon, so she loses her composure. Jinwoo realizes that she still hasn't gotten over the trauma, and he decides to help them, knowing they're fighting against a D-rank boss, which is weaker than the one he just defeated. The hunters are about to get overwhelmed, but Jinwoo launches his sword with incredible strength, and it hits the golem, creating an opening for the other hunters, who use the opportunity to take it out. One of them wonders how they were able to defeat it because their attacks weren't working. He sees the sword on the ground, so he inquires about it. A soldier points to Jinwoo, but he's nowhere to be found. We see that he has already left the scene because he wasn't expecting his attack to have such an impact. Back in the hospital, Jinwoo continues his workout routine, and a nurse enters his room. She's surprised to see that he's already ripped, wondering how he was able to achieve it in just a few days. She informs him that he's going to get discharged, but as he's about to leave his room, she asks for his number because she can't resist his charm. We meet the S-rank hunter Beck, who is invited as a special guest on a TV show. The interviewer asks him about his daily routine, so he tells her that he's always training because he doesn't want his combat skills to get rusty. He reveals that he used to work as a firefighter, so he knows how to respond to dangerous situations. Jaina is watching the interview, but she realizes that she's already late, and Jinwoo tells her to be careful on her way to school. She notices he looks different, thinking it must be because of his training. As she's about to leave for school, he gives her an umbrella, telling her to stay safe. After she leaves, he checks his daily quest and notes that he gained muscle mass, thinking it must be because his stats increased. He notes that he still hasn't distributed his ability points, thinking he needs more than just strength to defeat powerful monsters. So, he decides to use them to improve his agility and perception. At that moment, he receives a call from the landlord, who tells him that his rent is due. He promises to pay immediately. He knows that he has become stronger, so he thinks he'll be able to earn more money by raiding dungeons, but he notes that it's difficult to find a good job because his rank is still at E. He thinks about undergoing a re-evaluation, thinking it will allow him to raise his rank and earn more money, but it would attract too much attention, knowing his case is unusual. So, he ultimately decides against it. He's surprised when he sees a high-paying job for rank E hunters, so he rushes over to the location and completes his daily quest along the way. He meets a hunter named Dong Suk, who explains that his party only has 6 members and they need 8 people to enter the S-rank dungeon. So, they're hiring hunters to fill the slots, but he mentions that Jinwoo won't share the spoils because he won't be fighting the monsters, but they will pay him a large commission for joining them. Jinwoo accepts the job, and Dong Suk orders him to carry their luggage. Jinwoo wonders why their party has no healer, so Dong Suk tells him that they're already used to fighting without one. He finds this strange, and he reads the contract, realizing that they won't be liable for anything that happens to him in the dungeon, but he signs it anyway. A D-ranked hunter named Eugene approaches him, revealing that he also accepted the job, and everyone is impressed with his equipment, thinking he must be from a rich family. They prepare to enter the gate, and everyone notes that it looks enormous, but Jinwoo explains that the size of the gate doesn't matter, and the Hunter Association classifies it based on the amount of magic power it exudes. They enter the gate and realize that the dungeon is too dark, so the mage Kian-won lightens up the area, allowing them to see what's inside. Jinwoo notes that it reminds him of the temple because it's pitch black and there are no monsters blocking their path. As they head deep into the dungeon, they hear monsters approaching, so everyone prepares for battle, but they're surrounded by openings, so they panic, wondering where the monsters will come from. Jinwoo observes his surroundings and warns them that the ants will attack from above, so they're able to respond on time, and they start fighting the ants. Jinwoo notes that they're used to working together. He observes that Eugene lacks strength, but his equipment allows him to make up for it, and he's glad that everyone is doing well, but he admits that he's frustrated because the job is too easy. They're able to defeat the ants, and they start searching for magic gems. Dong Suk wonders how Jinwoo was able to predict where the ants would come from. He mentions that it was just a gut feeling, and Kian-won notes that the ants have bite marks, thinking they were attacked by a powerful monster. Eugene is happy that he was able to kill a monster, revealing that this is his first mission, so his father bought him expensive gear. But Jinwoo warns him to be cautious because he can sense that something's wrong. At the White Tiger Guild, we see the hunters in the gym when they notice an explosion, but they maintain their composure because it happens all the time, knowing their guild master is just training. We see that Beck blew a massive hole into a boulder, but he mentions that it isn't even a warm-up, ordering his subordinates to clean it up. We return to the dungeon as Jinwoo continues to carry the luggage for the group, but he thinks that Dong's party is suspicious because they have no healer despite their excellent teamwork. They see injured ants along the way, thinking the boss should be nearby, and as they proceed deeper into the dungeon, they reach an area surrounded by mana crystals, thinking they're going to be rich. Eugene reads Jinwoo's contract, and he explains that the crystals don't count as spoils, so Jinwoo must receive a portion of it. Dong Suk agrees with him, but he reveals that the boss is guarding the crystals, and they know that the dungeon will close after it's defeated. So he suggests mining the crystals before they deal with it, knowing it's still sleeping. But Dong Suk explains that they left their mining tools, so they need to leave the dungeon to get it. They leave Eugene and Jinwoo inside, and Dong Suk orders Kyuwon to block the path, so he uses his magic, causing an explosion that seals the entrance. Jinwoo realizes that they have been betrayed as he recalls that Song Chi warned him that the crime rate for dungeon raids is high because there's no way to tell if a hunter has been murdered in a dungeon. Eugene blames himself for talking about the contract, but Jinwoo knows that Dong Suk's party was planning to kill them from the very beginning. The spider approaches them, and Eugene promises to protect Jinwoo, who notes that the spider is stronger than the bosses he defeated so far. He believes that he's no match for it, but he recalls his encounter with the statue of God, knowing the spider is nothing compared to it. So he tells Eugene to stand back as he prepares to fight the boss. Dong's companion wonders why they're using the spider to eliminate Jinwoo and Eugene, so he explains that he didn't want to risk waking it up. He thinks that it will go to sleep after it eats them, and he reveals that there's a small path above the cave, planning to use it to return. As he mentions that Jinwoo and Eugene are as good as dead, Eugene thinks that Jinwoo doesn't stand a chance because he's just an E-rank hunter, but he refuses to back down, thinking he's strong enough to defeat it. He charges in, attacking with ridiculous speed, and Eugene is surprised to see this. But we cut to Ganhee as he tells Jin Chul that he's exhausted because of his meetings, so Jin Chul invites him to a sparring match, thinking it will help him unwind. He accepts it, saying he's out of his prime, but as they start training, Jin Chul struggles to hit him, and he counters with a devastating blow, allowing him to win the match. Jin Chul thanks Ganhee for his guidance, saying he's amazing because he's incredibly strong for his age. He tells Gile that his moves have improved, advising him not to neglect his training because it will help him survive dangerous situations. We return to Jinwoo as he tries to cut the spider's legs, but he realizes that its armor is too tough. He notes that its attacks are deadly, thinking it could kill him in one hit. He struggles against it as Eugene wonders how he can move so fast, thinking he must have intentionally lowered his ranking by controlling his magic. But Eugene becomes afraid because few hunters are capable of doing this, and they're usually psychopaths who take pleasure in killing. Jinwoo realizes that his fatigue is increasing, knowing it will cause his movements to slow down. So he thinks about using his dagger's special abilities to end the fight. He sees the spider's head, thinking it's the weak spot, so he charges in, but the spider spits acid, forcing him to retreat. He knows that he needs to close the distance, so he uses his dash skill, allowing him to move even faster. He attacks the spider's head, and it has no effect, but he refuses to give up, so he continues his assault. But his fatigue accumulates, causing him to slow down, and he crashes to the ground. The spider is about to strike the finishing blow, but he uses his full recovery, allowing him to dodge it, and he launches a surprise attack, stabbing the spider's eye. The dagger's ability activates, paralyzing the spider and draining its health as Jinwoo continues his relentless assault. It crashes to the ground, and the system mentions that the boss has been defeated. But Eugene can't believe his eyes, thinking he was right about Jinwoo, so he tells Jinwoo to relax as he mines the crystals. But at that moment, Dong Suk's party arrives, realizing that the boss has been defeated. They think Eugene was the one who killed it, and Dong Suk tells him to eliminate Jinwoo, saying they will spare his life if he obeys them. But he refuses, preparing to fight them. So they start approaching him, and at that moment, Jinwoo receives an urgent quest telling him to eliminate them. He's surprised to see this, realizing that the system is telling him to kill people, but Kyunwon suddenly attacks him, blowing him away. We meet the hunter Hee-jin as she starts talking with her friends, asking them how they're doing. Her friend reveals she entered an A-rank dungeon to train, but it was cleared in an instant because Cha easily defeated the monsters. The girl thinks they are lucky to be in the large guilds, and she mentions a rumor saying there are teams with an abnormally high casualty rate. We return to the dungeon as everyone thinks that Jinwoo is dead, but we see that he's still alive, and he recalls that he lives in a world where only the strong survive, wondering how he forgot about this. He's about to lose consciousness, but he realizes that the system wants him to survive, so it's telling him to fight for his life. He gets back up, surprising everyone, as he realizes that he has to be strong because weak people will have everything taken from them. They call him the weakest hunter in the world, but he asks them if they're ready to face the consequences as he unleashes an ominous aura. Dong's companion approaches him, reminding him that he's just an E-rank hunter, but he suddenly kills the man, slicing his head off. Everyone is surprised to see this, wondering when he pulled out his weapon, and he notes that he just murdered someone, but he knows that he did it to save his own life. Dong's party attacks him, but he manages to defend himself, slaughtering them as they try to kill him. Kyunwon tries to blast him, but he suddenly disappears and lands a counterattack, taking him out in an instant. Dong-suk freaks out, realizing that Jinwoo was hiding his true powers, but he mentions that he's stronger than his companions as he uses his skill to strengthen his body. He believes that Jinwoo relies on his speed and is using his dagger to deal damage, but he knows that it won't work against him because his body is as hard as steel. He charges in, trying to avenge his companions, but Jinwoo smashes him against the ground as he realizes that he doesn't stand a chance. So he starts begging for his life, telling Jinwoo that he can have the crystals, but he mentions that Dong-suk tried to kill him 3 times, reminding him that no one will know what happens in the dungeon. Jinwoo slices his head off, allowing him to complete the urgent quest. But the dungeon starts collapsing as the gate is about to close. They're able to escape in time, and they report that Dong's party was killed during the raid. Jinwoo realizes that he received a reward for completing the urgent quest, and he acquires a skill called Murderous Intent, which weakens the enemies by causing them to panic. The official believes them, and she judges them based on their equipment, thinking Eugene was the one who defeated the boss while Jinwoo did nothing to help, but Eugene thanks him for saving his life. Jin Chul receives a report about the incident but finds it suspicious when he hears that Jinwoo was involved, and as he looks at the file, he recognizes Dong-suk because he's the brother of a famous hunter. Jinwoo returns home, and Ji-na is happy to see he bought food. She asks him how his raid went, but he thinks back to how he didn't even hesitate when he killed the hunters. He wonders if there's something wrong with him, but his sister snaps him out of it. He decides not to worry about it, thinking he needs to prioritize getting stronger to protect his family. As he drinks his beer, he gets a notification of a debuff, but it seems to get cleansed. He keeps drinking in his room but realizes he can't get drunk and sees that one of his quest rewards gives him regeneration and immunity to status effects. He gets a call from Eugene, and they meet up at a cafe. Eugene sees him as his boss and says he's putting together a team, but Jinwoo instantly turns him down. Jinwoo prepares to leave, but Eugene begs him to listen. He explains he's trying to become licensed as a guild master, but it requires 20 raids worth of experience. His father owns one of the country's biggest construction companies, and they are looking to form a guild. Jinwoo thinks about all the treasures that can be found in dungeons, so he isn't surprised with their plan. Eugene mentions his father wants an S-rank hunter to be the guild master with his brother as second in command. Jinwoo notes that there are only 7 S-rank hunters in the whole country, and all of them are already in guilds besides one named Man who's currently retired. Jinwoo realizes they plan to poach one from another guild, but he warns that it's a bad idea. Eugene reveals his brother can't be the guild master because he didn't awaken as a hunter, so it's his chance to take his place. Eugene points out how they can help each other. Jinwoo can participate in raids while hiding his power, while Eugene can convince his father of his success if he only has help from an E-rank hunter. He shows Jinwoo the building they plan to use as the guild's headquarters, valuing it at around $20 million, and he offers it in exchange for his help on 19 more raids. Jinwoo considers the offer but thinks that since he's the only person that can level up, he will eventually reach S rank, so $20 million would be nothing when that time comes, and he ends up turning down the offer. Meanwhile in America, we meet Dong-suk's brother Dong-soo, and he hears the news about his brother. He knows his brother was murdered. Looking at the information on the two survivors, he plans to fly back to Korea to find them, but his assistant tells him his schedule is full, so he agrees to wait, hoping the two will survive until he has time for them. Jinwoo goes running with his sister, and he wonders what she would do if she had $20 million, but she finds it unrealistic. As Jinwoo goes to complete his daily quest, he realizes that the counter can go beyond his requirement. He decides to test the limit and realizes he can do double the requirement. It turns into a secret quest, and he gets the option to receive a blessed loot box. It turns into another key, which seems to lead to the demon's castle with a difficulty rank of S. He's shocked when he sees that it contains the ingredients for the elixir of life, and he thinks he can use it to save his mother. He opens the dungeon, revealing a flaming portal, wondering if he can really take on an S-rank dungeon. But we see he saved a teleportation stone just in case. As he approaches the entrance, he's confronted by a Cerberus, but he's determined to get stronger. He uses his dash to approach the beast, and he starts slashing at it, but it barely does any damage. He uses his murderous intense skill, but it has no effect. His arm gets bitten, and he loses a third of his HP. He manages to get back up, but the Cerberus uses a skill that doubles its stats. Jinwoo is unable to react, and he takes another hit. He gets smashed continuously, and we see his health is getting low. He prepares to use his teleportation stone, but the Cerberus attacks again, causing him to drop it. He wonders how he can survive, and he decides to try the snake's poison, remembering how he has debuff immunity, so he's able to get rid of the negative effect. The Cerberus lunges at him, taking another bite out of him, but he survives and sees that the Cerberus's skill has ended. He rushes at it, and he's finally able to do some damage. The beast bites down on him, but he barely survives, and he stabs the dog's eye. He stabs it repeatedly, and he manages to kill the beast. He levels up after the fight, allowing him to heal, and he's glad that it's over. He receives another key to unlock the demon's castle as well as the formula for the elixir of life, which requires 3 items from within the castle. Jinwoo realizes he needs to get stronger before he takes it on, but he swears to be back for it soon. He meets up with Eugene, saying he has changed his mind, so he's going to be joining the raids under the condition that they will enter the dungeons alone. Eugene is surprised to hear this, reminding him that they need 8 members to enter the C-rank dungeons, but he explains that they can just hire people to meet the quota. Eugene thinks it's too risky, but Jinwoo tells him that they will be able to clear dungeons without casualties, and his father will be impressed to learn about this. He realizes that Jinwoo has a point, so he decides to look for members to join them. We see Cha in the middle of her training session, and while she's resting, she's approached by a man who invites her to be the guild master of Eugene's guild. Eugene's father Han tells him that the world has changed since the dungeons appeared, saying it can no longer maintain its infrastructure without the resources from the dungeons. Han knows that the world is relying on hunters because they're the only ones who can gather the resources, and they're controlled by the association, which is owned by the state. But he reveals that the guilds are the ones making a fortune since they're earning profits as the hunters gather resources. He mentions that the top guilds in the country are extremely wealthy, so he wants to establish his own guild, thinking it will benefit everyone. We return to Jinwoo as he completes his daily quest, realizing that he can no longer go beyond his requirement, so he can't get another blessed loot box. He wants to receive an item that will help him get stronger, and he opens a regular loot box, but he receives a bingo card, thinking it's useless. He realizes that completing daily quests is inefficient, so he wants to fight monsters to become stronger. He thinks about defeating the centipede at the penalty zone, thinking it will help him level up, but he isn't sure if it will give him any XP. At that moment, he realizes that the association is looking for hunters to clear a D-rank dungeon, and he decides to join, thinking it's better than relying on daily quests to increase his stats. But he becomes frustrated, realizing that his progress has slowed down. We cut to a dojo where we see Song Chi training his student. He receives an emergency summon from the Hunters Association, and his student wonders if he's going to retire as a hunter since he already lost his arm, but he explains that he wants to do his best to contribute to society. We see him with his family, and he also receives the emergency summon, but his wife wants him to quit being a hunter, reminding him that he almost died during the last raid. But he explains that he needs to make ends meet, telling her that he's going to be okay. At the Hunters Guild, Choi talks to Beck, who appears to be upset because Choi arranged the interview for him at the association. He thinks it was a waste of time, telling Choi that he should have attended it instead, but he explains that he isn't qualified because he isn't as likable. He tells Beck that Han is preparing to launch his own guild, but Beck reveals that he already knows about this, asking Choi why he wanted to see him. Joo-hee receives a call from her mother, who reveals that she's worried about her because she appears to be having issues, asking her to quit being a hunter. But she becomes upset, telling her mother to stop running her life, and she ends the call. She starts questioning her capabilities, but she wants to keep on trying, and as she leaves her room, we see that she has received the emergency summon. Cha approaches Choi, and she tells him that she's been invited as the guild master of Yujin's guild, but she reveals that she turned them down, and he's happy to hear this. She tells him that she saw Beck on her way to the office, wondering what he's doing there. We learn that Choi told Beck about Jeju Island, revealing that it has been sealed off after their raid failed, and everyone's trying to forget about it. Beck thinks it doesn't matter, but Choi becomes upset, saying he'll never forget what happened on the island. He wants to clear it, asking Beck to help him gather allies as he wonders if Beck also lost something during their raid. Beck recalls that they ended up getting overwhelmed, leading to the death of his friends, and he continues to think about them to this day. We see Song-chi walking around the city as he thinks about his magical powers, thinking it doesn't fit him since he's a swordsman. Along the way, he encounters Jinwoo, realizing that his leg has been healed, so Song-chi wonders what happened to him. He explains that his leg was already healed when he woke up, so Song-chi thinks that a high-ranked healer took care of it. He's happy to see Jinwoo, but he realizes that Song-chi never got his arm back, so he becomes sad. But Song-chi tells him it's okay, and they realize that they're going to be working together. They make their way to the portal, where they see Joo-hee and Kim with another man who joined them during their last raid. Chewie is happy to see them, but the men fall silent because they're ashamed of what they did, knowing they sacrificed Jinwoo to save themselves. Joo-hee realizes that Jinwoo looks different, and she's glad that he was able to recover. But at that moment, a van arrives, and 3 convicts join them as the official reveals that they were sent by the association to clear the dungeon because there aren't enough hunters in the area. She assures everyone that they won't cause trouble because the B-rank hunter Kong will be watching over them, thinking he should be able to dispose of them if they don't cooperate. Jinwoo finds them suspicious, telling Joo-hee not to participate in the raid, but she tells him that she's joining because she wants to stay with him. Kong removes the convicts' restraints, but he warns them that he will kill them if they act up. He wonders who's going to be acting as the raid leader, and Jinwoo tells Song-chi to take the role. He thanks Jinwoo for trusting him, blaming himself for what happened in the temple, as he mentions that they were only able to survive because of Jinwoo, so he thanks Jinwoo for saving their lives, and they head into the portal, ready to face what lies ahead. They're attacked by goblins, but the convicts are easily able to deal with them, and Song-chi wonders if they are the real monsters. Jinwoo also easily takes out the goblins, and Joo-hee notes how she hasn't even needed to heal him. They continue exploring the dungeon and come to a fork in the road. Kong suggests they should split up, and he decides to take the convicts down one of the paths but tells them to regroup if they find the boss room. However, thanks to Jinwoo's perception, he's able to tell which path leads to the boss. He thinks that the goblins aren't enough XP for him, so he tells Song-chi to take the left path. Kim and the other man take the middle, and they split up, but Jinwoo notices Kong watching him. Kim takes out a goblin, and he's glad they're pretty weak. The other man hopes things go smoothly, but Kim thinks it can't be that bad since they let the weakest hunter on the mission, so the dungeon must be low level. But the man reminds him that Jinwoo was also in the last dungeon. Kim feels bad remembering how they abandoned him, and he decides to apologize to Jinwoo after this mission. Meanwhile, with the convicts, they get bored since the goblins are no challenge. In a flashback, we see King talking to a man who complains about the 3 men who abused his daughter, and she ended up taking her own life. but hunters are able to get reduced sentences by participating in dungeon raids. He thinks it's not fair, so he offers Kong money to kill them in the dungeon, saying that no one outside will know what happened. Back in the present, Kong tells the men he plans to report that they died to a horde of goblins. He easily takes them down, and he prepares to torture them, but Kim suddenly walks in on him. Meanwhile, Jinwoo remembers how he met Kong at the hospital, hoping he doesn't recognize him, but he suddenly hears a scream, so they rush back and find the bodies of the convicts. Kim's companion is down, and Kim is also in terrible condition. Joo-hee quickly goes to heal him, and Song-chi can tell he was attacked with a blade. Kim thinks he can't be saved, but Jinwoo reminds him about his family wanting him to survive so he can hold his grudge against him. Kim wishes he could apologize under better circumstances, but says he's sorry as he fades away. Kong watches them from above, preparing to attack, but Jinwoo catches his arm. Kong is impressed, but Song-chi wonders why someone from the association would do something like this. Song-chi prepares to take him on, thinking Jinwoo isn't strong enough, and he gets Joo-hee to buff him. Even though Kong is higher ranked than him, he thinks assassins usually have low defense. Kong laughs at him for being a mage that uses a sword but acknowledges that he has some skill. However, Song-chi takes a hit, but Joo-hee instantly heals him, and Kong is annoyed by her, thinking he needs to take her out first. He rushes at her, but Song-chi stops him, saying he won't lose in terms of swordsmanship, but Kang's speed is too much, and he gets cut from all sides. Joo-hee tries to heal him, but she's out of power, and Kong thinks it's over. But Song-chi suddenly uses his fire to blast him. Kong manages to avoid it and commends him on his plan of using the sword as a distraction. He prepares to finish him off, but Jinwoo suddenly pushes him back. Kong wonders who he is, so he introduces himself as just an E-rank hunter, but Kong doesn't believe him since he was able to stop 2 of his attacks, and he realizes that Jinwoo must have had a second awakening. Song-chi thinks it must have been the double dungeon, and Kong finally remembers who Jinwoo is, but he still thinks he has the upper hand since he has more experience. Jinwoo wonders why he did all of this, so he explains how the father asked him to kill the man, saying he's carrying out justice. But Jinwoo wonders about Kim since he was tortured instead of being silenced, so Jinwoo thinks he's lying about wanting justice. He starts fighting with Jinwoo, and Song-chi can't believe how fast they're moving. Their speed seems to be equal, but Kong still thinks his experience gives him the edge. He kicks dirt into Jinwoo's eyes, landing multiple slashes, but Jinwoo's system activates, giving him a quest to defeat Kong. He gathers his power, and he suddenly gets even faster. Kong is hit by his dagger poison, but Kong decides to use his own skill as he suddenly vanishes. Jinwoo tries to find him, but Kong notes that his stealth skill completely conceals him. Jinwoo tries to defend himself, but he gets cut in the leg, and Kong mentions that no one has ever seen his skill and lived to tell the tale. He thinks he's faster now that he cut Jinwoo's leg, but Jinwoo uses his full recovery to instantly heal it. Kong becomes confused, wondering how a combat hunter can also use healing magic, and he starts to think Jinwoo is dangerous. He disappears once again, but Jinwoo is now able to block his attacks by tracking his bloodlust. Jinwoo uses his murderous intent, completely overwhelming Kong, and he's defeated in an instant. Jinwoo completes his quest, and he also acquires the stealth skill. Kong wonders what he is, but Jinwoo says he isn't sure but says that he's just a hunter that gets stronger with every fight. He thinks about how he's gotten stronger but also feels something inside of him falling apart. Joo-hee and Song-chi thank him for saving them, and he tells them to get out of the dungeon while he finishes the rest as he heads to take on the boss alone. We see Jin Chul arriving at the scene, and he's surprised to learn Kong has been killing people in secret, thinking he was too careless as his supervisor. His assistant leads him to the survivors, and he's shocked to see Jinwoo among them. He wonders who defeated Kong, so Jinwoo thinks he's about to be exposed, but Song-chi suddenly claims that he was the one who defeated Kong. Jin Chul wonders how he did it since he's lower rank than Kong, so he explains it was because he had a healer. But Jin Chul still finds it suspicious but decides to accept it for now. Jinwoo realizes he can't get cocky just because he defeated Kong because he can now sense that Jin Chul is A-ranked and he stands no chance against him. Song Chi apologizes for overstepping but thinks Jinwoo must have a good reason for hiding his strength, saying this is his way of repaying him. Joo-hee realizes that Jinwoo has changed, but she still freaks out during her missions, thinking she doesn't have what it takes to become a successful hunter. She recalls how she had to save him during their past missions because he always got injured, and she reminds him that he promised to have dinner with her. She shows him the essence stone he gave her, saying she's going to retire so that she can stay with her parents and help them with the family business. She tells him to visit her during his free time, and she returns the stone as they bid each other farewell. Jinwoo recalls that Jin Chul warned him to be careful because Dong's brother is looking into him. He recognizes Dong Su as an S-rank hunter, and Jin Chul tells him that Dong Su doesn't care about the facts, saying he will be coming for them because they were with Dong Suk when he got killed. Jin Chul explains that the law is powerless against S-rank hunters because they're too powerful, so he advises Jinwoo to leave the country with his family, making Jinwoo realize he needs to get stronger to defend himself. After some time, we see Jinwoo with Eugene as they prepare to raid an S-rank dungeon. Eugene reveals that he has assembled a strike team, explaining that he chose the hunters who are absolutely useless because they don't need to fight anyway. Jinwoo realizes that he recruited a minor, but he explains that it doesn't matter, and a girl named Songyi approaches him, saying she's qualified to work as a hunter. So he starts asking her questions, and we learn that she's an E-rank hunter who has no raiding experience whatsoever. Jinwoo tells the other hunters to wait outside while he and Eugene clear the dungeon together, but one of them asks if they're serious because they're paying everyone 3 million just to do nothing. Eugene confirms this, saying they don't need to fight but they aren't allowed to tell anyone about their deal, or they need to pay him 10 times the amount. Eugene wears a new set of armor, saying he's planning to use it during the raid, but Jinwoo pokes him, and he crashes to the ground. So Jinwoo advises him to take it off because he can't even move while wearing it. They enter the gate, but everyone thinks they're insane, thinking they won't make it because they're low-rank hunters. But after an hour, everyone sees Eugene leaving the gate, and they realize that the dungeon has been cleared, and they can't believe it, wondering how they defeated the boss. They decide to head to the next gate, and Eugene reveals that they plan to clear 3 dungeons in one day, saying everyone's going to earn 9 million in total. Jinwoo encounters countless monsters during the raids, but he easily defeats all of them, allowing him to level up. Eugene realizes that Jinwoo is getting stronger because he's using new skills, and he notes that stealth is useful because it allows him to fight while he's invisible. Eugene takes the loot as Jinwoo realizes that he doesn't have enough mana to use his skills, so he thinks about increasing his intellect. He suddenly receives a notification, which mentions that he has reached the required level, so he can now accept the job change quest. At the White Tiger Guild, we meet the manager named Sang as he learns that someone spent 150 million to acquire the rights to the S-rank gates. His assistant tells him about Eugene's strike team, explaining that Eugene is the son of a wealthy businessman. But Sang thinks he's crazy, and he looks into the members of the team, realizing that Jinwoo is one of them, and he takes interest in him. Sang believes that Jinwoo has reawakened, telling his assistant that Jinwoo has survived 3 major disasters, which led to the death of several hunters. He believes the only explanation is that Jinwoo has gotten stronger, so he decides to look for him. Sang finds Eugene's group, but he wonders why they're having a picnic, and Songyi approaches him, telling him that the area is off-limits. So he explains that his curiosity led him there, asking her if she's a part of the team, but he wonders why Jinwoo isn't with them. He realizes that Jinwoo is trying to clear the dungeon without them, thinking he must be extremely powerful, and Sang decides to leave. Moments later, Jinwoo exits the gate, and he asks Eugene if he can take a day off because he has something he needs to do. But Eugene explains that they still need to clear the dungeons he reserved, and they realize that they might have to cancel it, but Eugene won't get his money back. We cut to Choi as he has a nightmare about his raid on Jeju Island. We learn that he's been having the same dream, but he realizes that it's almost time to put the plan into action. We return to Jinwoo as Sang approaches him, and they have a drink at a cafe as Sang introduces himself, saying he's from the White Tiger Guild. He tells Jinwoo that they want to hire him, and they're willing to pay him twice the amount that Eugene is paying him. But he asks Sang how much the White Tiger Guild is worth, so he reveals that it's close to 50 billion. And Jinwoo explains that they can't afford him because Eugene offered to give him a building worth 30 billion. Sang is surprised to hear this, and Jinwoo is about to leave, but he wonders how Sang learned about him. He suddenly disappears, and Sang panics as Jinwoo cuts him. He realizes that Jinwoo is using the stealth skill, so Sang immediately apologizes for looking into him, saying he meant no harm. He reveals that he came across Jinwoo's name while he was looking into the dungeon market, saying the guild needs S-rank dungeons to train rookies, but Eugene already bought the rights to all of them. He explains that he and his assistant are the only ones who know about Jinwoo, and he tells Sang that he wants to keep a low profile, threatening to kill them if they write a report about him. So Sang promises to keep his mouth shut, and Jinwoo spares his life, explaining that his team needs to monopolize the S-rank gates until they achieve their goal. He offers to sell 3 gates for 900 million, but Sang thinks it's too expensive, offering 600 million instead, and Jinwoo ends up agreeing. Before they part ways, Jinwoo tells Sang to open his mouth, and he gives Sang a healing potion. So he asks Jinwoo if he trusts him, but he just tells Sang to keep his mouth shut. Jinwoo returns home, and Eugene tells him that he has received the 600 million from Sang, asking him how he was able to sell the dungeons at a ridiculously high price, but he refuses to say anything. Sang realizes that he has been scammed because there are other S-rank dungeons selling for less than half the price. He receives a message from Jinwoo which mentions that he's going to forget that Sang spied on him, and Sang realizes that they're now even. Jinwoo leaves the city, and he goes to a forest where he plans to complete the job change quest. He notes that he was given time to decide, thinking the quest is going to be difficult, but he accepts it anyway, and a portal appears, so he enters it as he wonders what's waiting for him inside. He realizes that the dungeon is too peaceful, but the system informs him that he can't heal while he's inside, and he can't leave until he has cleared the dungeon. A knight approaches him, so he equips his dagger, and he manages to land a hit, but it doesn't do anything. So he tries using his skill to land a critical hit, but his dagger can't pierce through its armor, and he realizes that his weapon is useless against it. So he uses his bare hands, and he's able to remove its head, killing it in an instant, but a group of knights suddenly appear. We cut to Eugene as he has dinner with his family. We learn that his brother Yuyong is trying to establish a guild, but he can't find an S-rank hunter to lead it, so he thinks about recruiting hunters from overseas. He knows that Eugene is also trying to start a guild in secret, so he tells Eugene not to get in the way, but he chooses not to say anything, thinking his brother will be surprised to learn about Jinwoo. Jinwoo uses his brute strength to defeat the knights, and he notes that he's getting tired, but he suddenly senses a presence, so he takes his weapon and he stabs an assassin, realizing that they have the stealth skill. A mage suddenly attacks him, but it misses, as he realizes that the enemies in the dungeon are similar to the ones he fought in the past. He knows that dealing with them is going to be difficult because they have different weaknesses, and he notes that he needs higher intellect to deal with the mages. So he struggles against them, and he realizes that his fatigue is starting to build up, but he still manages to defeat them, and he realizes that they dropped an armor. So he decides to wear it, realizing that it's invisible and it doesn't restrict his movements. He notes that his fatigue has recovered, so he decides to proceed deeper, and he sees an enormous door. So he opens it, thinking he's about to meet the boss. He enters the throne room where he senses a powerful presence as the knight commander named Igris appears. He realizes that it's stronger than him, thinking it's nothing like the opponents he defeated so far. It suddenly charges in, and he's able to evade its attack, but it shatters the pillar behind him. Igris takes a swing, and he tries to block it, but it sends him flying, and Igris continues to pursue him as he struggles to keep up with its movements. He tries to fight back, but it dodges his attacks, and he manages to land a hit, but it doesn't do anything. Igris strikes back, and he tries to defend against it, but it manages to overpower him, pushing him back. He notes that he can match Igris's speed, but he's no match for its strength, and his dagger is useless against its armor. So he wonders how he can defeat it. He doesn't think he can win without his weapon, but he decides to throw hands, and Igris throws away his weapons, wanting to fight fair. We see Gon-hee in his office as Jin Chol joins him, telling him that Choi has made his move, and Gon-hee receives a call from Choi, who reveals that his group is ready to head out. He thanks Ganhee for approving the mission, and Ganhee explains that the public hasn't forgotten about Jeju Island, telling him to be careful. We return to Jinwoo as Igris smashes him to the ground and throws him away. He endures a brutal beatdown, and he notes that he would have died if it weren't for his armor, thinking the only way to defeat Igris is to boost his speed. So he uses his dash skill, and he attacks Igris with everything he has, but it manages to evade his attacks, and it counters, launching him to the air and smashing him into the ground. But Jinwoo refuses to give up, attacking Igris relentlessly, and he's able to hit its head, causing it to black out. But it immediately recovers, and it becomes enraged, delivering a devastating combo and sending him crashing against the wall. Jinwoo is exhausted as Igris summons its sword, trying to finish him off, but he still refuses to give up, pushing the sword away. He equips his dagger and uses it to blind Igris, causing it to become stunned as he smashes it against the corner. But Igris takes his dagger, trying to use it to kill him, but it suddenly disappears because it can't change owners, so it returns to Jinwoo's inventory. He equips it once again and targets Igris's neck, attacking it with everything he has. The dagger pierces through it, killing Igris in an instant as Jinwoo realizes he has won, but he notes that he just got lucky because Igris was the superior fighter. The system shows him his rewards, which include an S-rank helmet, so he tries wearing it as he notes that this is the first time he acquired such powerful equipment. He also receives a ruler's stone which allows him to learn a skill called the ruler's hand, and he wonders why it dropped a teleportation stone, thinking he has already cleared the dungeon. But portals suddenly appear as the system tells him to survive for as long as possible. It displays a timer as countless knights enter the room, so Jinwoo takes them on, but he realizes that there's too many of them. So he uses his stealth skill, thinking about hiding to buy time, but a mage appears, and it casts a spell which allows the knights to see him. He's about to get hit, so he uses his murderous intent, stunning the knights, and he takes them out. But he realizes that he's running out of mana. He struggles to fight on, realizing that he has only survived for 5 minutes, and he thinks about using the teleportation stone, but a knight suddenly attacks him, causing him to drop it. He gets sent flying and thinks that without the teleportation stone, the only way to survive is to continue fighting. He does his best against the knights, but his stamina is low, so he can't use his skills. He barely has any HP left, but he refuses to give up and continues to fight. However, he reaches his limits and is brought to his knees. He thinks about his companions telling him he has done enough, and he sees his old self, thinking he should be happy with how far he has come. Meanwhile, at the association, we learn more about the previous Jeju Island raid. It was a horrific failure where many lives were lost, scarring all the hunters that survived, but Ganhee thinks it's something they need to overcome or else they will all be destroyed. Jinwoo continues to struggle, and his other self tells him that although he might look different, he's still the same A-rank hunter, telling him to know his place. Jinwoo gets smashed into the ground, and a knight approaches to finish him off, but he notices that his daily quest is just about to expire. He gets a penalty for not completing it and gets teleported to the penalty zone just in time. He uses the store to buy potions to recover his stamina, but he's suddenly surrounded by giant centipedes, but he charges at them, determined to get even stronger. He manages to defeat them all, gaining multiple levels, and he has 10 minutes left in the area. He checks his shop for new weapons, and he buys the Night Killer Dagger which deals bonus damage to armored monsters. He also uses the ruler's stone he got from Igris, and he gains the ruler's hand skill, which allows him to affect objects without directly touching them. His timer reaches 0, and he's sent back to the dungeon, but he's ready for round 2. Meanwhile, we see Choi's group preparing for another raid on Jeju Island. Cha apologizes for not being able to be part of the last raid, but suddenly they detect a strange mana source in the water. Jinwoo is able to defeat the knights with his new weapon, but he feels something is off because he doesn't seem to be gaining any XP. He notices that the mages are casting some kind of strange spell, and he realizes that the knights are just summoned monsters. He throws his dagger to take out one of the mages, and its summoned knights are also destroyed. Jinwoo continues to go after the mages, using his new skill to pull one of them in. However, the 3 remaining mages work together, and they summon a giant golem, but Jinwoo dodges its attacks, and he goes straight for the mages. The golem continues to attack, but Jinwoo pushes it back and manages to destroy it. The timer reaches over 4 hours, and he completes the job change quest. He gets to switch to an advanced class based on his performance, and he's given the necromancer class. He wonders what's going on since necromancers are usually casters, but he hasn't put any of his stats into intellect. He thinks it's a waste since it doesn't suit his fighting style, and he's given an option to reject it. But when he tries to reject it, the system mentions that the necromancer is a hidden class, so he ends up accepting it. And since he was able to exceed the survival time and kill all the monsters, he gains a number of bonus points. His advancement points exceed the threshold, causing dark energy to swell around him, and his class is upgraded to the Shadow Monarch. The job change quest is completed, and he starts to hear the voices of the knights as he gains the ability to use shadow extraction on them, and it requires a command word to activate, Arise, causing the knights to stand once more and become his minions. He thinks about controlling something stronger, so he turns his attention to Igris. He uses his extraction skill, and it suddenly pulses with energy, but the skill fails, and he only has 2 more attempts. He tries again, but it fails for a second time. Jinwoo thinks Igris must have been waiting for his king's return, but asks him to serve him instead. He activates his extraction skill one last time, and he successfully manages to turn Igris into one of his soldiers, but that's where the series ends for now.
If you're enjoying and want more, please drop a like and subscribe to Recap Ramen. Your support makes all the difference and helps us grow.